Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we will continue our discussion. Can you confirm that you can see the screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. So we had started discussing about combined cycle power plants. Okay, and we will briefly go through this combined cycle power plants. So what was the advantage or what was the requirement of combined cycle power plants? We saw before that what is the typical requirement of an ideal Rankine cycle fluid, okay, or an ideal Rankine cycle. And since no single fluid can cover all the points, if you go for a single fluid, then water is best. But if you want to go for a better option, sometimes it is better to go with two separate Rankine cycles, one on top of the other, so that the range of temperature that is covered is more. Okay, for a given pressure range, the range of temperature covered is more. But obviously, this is much more complicated, and you need another working fluid apart from water. So, which is also one is that it is costlier. Then another is that this can be hazardous and has to be means there should not be any leakages and other things. So much more difficult to handle. That's why for very large scale thermal power plants, this type of combined cycle plants are not used. Okay. Although theoretically it is possible, in general these are not used. Only steam power plants, only steam is used as the working fluid. But small project type of plants have been developed based on this combined Rankine cycles. Okay, so this is of theoretical interest, but in practical purposes, not used very much because of difficulties associated with the high temperature cycle. Okay, for example, mercury is poisonous, sodium and potassium are highly corrosive, so difficult to handle also. So the advantage of using combined cycle plants, we have briefly discussed this part. The advantage is that for the same pressure ranges, you get heat addition at very high temperature, net heat addition at very high temperature, and heat removal at low temperature because you are combining two cycles. And how it is done? You have one cycle which is operating, which has a higher boiling point. So for a given pressure, it boils at a very high temperature. Okay, and say the heat addition occurs from this 0.6 to 0.7, and then this expands in a turbine as usual from 7 to 8, and from 8 to 5, instead of a condenser, it goes through a heat exchanger where it loses its heat, and this heat is supplied to the lower Rankine cycle. Okay, then the fluid is again pumped back to the high pressure 0.6. Okay, so this is the cycle for the upper fluid B. For the lower temperature fluid, this heating from 2 dash to 2 double dash is done using the heat exchange process. So the heat lost from 8 to 5 is taken up for heating the fluid from 2 dash to 2 double dash, the isothermal part, the two phase region, okay, the main heating part. Rest of the heating from 2 to 2 double dash and from 2 double dash to 3 is taken care of by using a boiler. Okay, and the rest of the other parts of the cycle looks like a simple Rankine cycle. So in general, the net heat exchange can be written as net heat addition is for the first cycle m dot b, where m dot b is the mass flow rate, into H7 minus H6. Then for the second cycle m dot a H3 minus H2 double dash plus m dot a H2 dash minus H2. Okay, so this part is not there because it is internally heated, 2 dash to 2 double dash. And net heat loss is m dot a H4 minus H1. Okay, there is no heat loss from 8 to 5 because that is taken up by the other process. The ratio of m dot b and m dot a can be obtained So I will keep this open in the other window. Ratio can be obtained using energy balance. So m dot b into h8 minus h5 is equal to m dot a into h2 double dash minus h2 dash. So from here we can find the ratio of m dot b minus divided by m dot a. Okay. And the work output also can be found just by using the individual cycles. So for example, W dot B net means from the B fluid cycle, the net work output is m dot b h7 minus h8 minus m dot b h6 minus h5. Similarly, you can find out the net work output from the lower temperature cycle, A cycle, m dot a h3 minus h4 minus m dot a h2 minus h1. Okay. And the efficiency can be obtained as the total net work output W dot A net plus W dot B net divided by the total heat addition in the boilers, Q dot boiler. Okay. So efficiency, theoretical efficiency of these cycles are high, but there are practical difficulties associated with these cycles. So they are not used for large power plants. Small pilot plants have been built, but for large power plants, practical aspects are difficult to manage, particularly for the high temperature cycle. Okay. Why is only this point from 2 dash to 2 double dash heated by this fluid from 5 to 8 and not the entire fluid from 2 to 3? Can anyone explain? Why only the part from 2 dash to 2 double dash is heated, not the entire part from 2 to 3 using the heat exchange process? No answers? If we heat from 2 to 3 using the process from 8 to 5, what will be the temperature, maximum temperature in this cycle? It has to be lower than 0.8, right? So one point is that this cycle will be at a much lower temperature, the other cycle. So the temperature difference, so this 2 dash and 2 double dash points will also be lower. So the difference between this line temperature 5 to 8 and the temperature of this 2 dash and 2 double dash and the other regions will be much lower as compared to 5 to 8. The temperature difference will be very large. So if the heat transfer occurs over a very large temperature difference, then there is more irreversibility. Okay. So which can be avoided if we just heat the two-phase regime using the heat exchange process. Then we can bring the temperatures very close to each other so that the irreversibility is very less. Okay, and also the 0.3 can be at a higher temperature as compared to the this condenser or the heat exchanger temperature 5 to 8. So you get more efficiency also. Okay, is it clear? Why no responses?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, so we will move on. Okay, so to the next type of combined cycle, there are two types of combined cycles. One we have already looked at, which is known as Rankine-Rankine cycle power plant. Okay, where there are two Rankine cycles, and I have said that this is not of much practical use. However, there is another type of combined cycle which is of more practical use, which is known as combined Brayton-Rankine cycle power plant or combined gas turbine steam turbine plant. Brayton cycle is for gas turbine and Rankine cycle is for steam turbine. You must have studied Brayton cycle briefly in thermodynamics. Have you studied? Do you remember? Anyway, we will go through it very quickly. But in thermodynamics, have you studied Brayton cycle?
Yes, sir. Basics, sir.
Basics. So here also we will just study the basic part. We will not go into details. Details of Brayton cycle we deal with in the gas turbine and jet engines course, which is an elective course in the next semester. Okay, but in this course, because we need to study about this combined Brayton cycle Rankine cycle plant, we'll just go through the basics of Brayton cycle also. So this combined gas, so Brayton cycle means it is the gas turbine cycle. Rankine cycle means steam turbine cycle. Okay, so this can be combined together, and there is a reason for this, that this is much more suitable. Okay, typically Brayton cycles or gas turbine plants operate at very high temperatures, and the exhaust gas from the gas turbine plant means from the gas turbine, the exhaust gas comes out at high temperature, and that is released to the air, means that is lost, that air is lost or the exhaust gases are lost. So the exhaust gases contain very large amount of energy which is not used up, which is just lost. Okay, I will explain why is this the case in general. So this extra energy that is there in the exhaust gases can be used up instead of a boiler to heat the working fluid in the Rankine cycle. These exhaust gases can be very high at very high temperature, more than 500 degrees centigrade. So it contains lot of energy, and this can be used up for heating up the fluid in the Rankine cycle instead of using a boiler. Okay, so that is the idea behind combined Brayton cycle Rankine cycle plants. So Brayton cycle operate at high temperature. There are other advantages. So let us quickly go through Brayton cycles. Okay, there are other advantages of gas turbines. So gas turbines can be started or stopped much more quickly as compared to steam turbine plants. So in a few minutes this can be started or stopped, or the changes, if there are changes in load requirement. So for example, we need more power or less power. So to cater to that, the changes in the gas turbine flow rate can be much faster. Okay, so load response is very fast in gas turbines. On the other hand, steam turbines generally take a lot of time to start. Okay, to start the furnace and boiler, everything, it takes a few hours, and the thermal inertia also is much more. So the time taken for responding to changes in load requirement also takes like the time requirement is also very large. So it takes a lot of time to respond to changes in load. Okay. So if we can combine a gas turbine steam turbine plant, there are multiple advantages. One is that the energy that is present in the exhaust gases of the gas turbine plant can be used up. Otherwise, it would have been lost to the atmosphere. Okay, and as I stated, these have large exhaust gas temperature, so this energy can be used up. Second is that the gas turbine part of the combined plant can respond to load changes very fast and also can start very fast. So whenever there is quick changes required in load, the gas turbine plant can supply quickly. Okay, and the bulk energy can be supplied by the steam turbine plant. Gas turbine plants also require large compressor work, as we will see later. So there are drawbacks of the gas turbine plants. It is not that everything is good for gas turbines. Okay. Rankine cycle can use the energy in the gas turbine exhaust gas as the heat source instead of a boiler. Okay. Let us look at this combined cycle plant and also the Brayton cycle, means how the Brayton cycle works and how the combined cycle plant works. We'll keep this image open in this side also. So in the Brayton cycle, there are 4 processes, if you don't remember. So I will start with the processes. So we will just first discuss the Brayton cycle. Okay, from 5 to 6 is pressure increase, isentropic increase in pressure. In this case, because it is a gaseous fluid, means it is gas, or typically air is used. Okay, in Brayton cycle. So because this is air, which is gas, we need a compressor to increase the pressure. Okay. And compressor work input is very large as compared to work input in a pump. Why is it the case? For the same pressure increase, the work input required in a compressor will be much larger as compared to that in a pump. Why is it so? Can anyone explain?
Just specific volume of gas is very large. So
Yes, correct.
right.
Specific volume of gas is very large. So V into delta P means V into P6 minus P5. That will be very large. And you cannot also use that equation V into delta P directly, because V also will keep on changing. So we find out using isentropic relations, ideal gas laws. Okay, what is the change in temperature, and from the change in temperature, I will show you this. From the change in temperature, we can find out what is the enthalpy increase in this part. So which will give us what is the work input required. Okay. So then from 6 to 7, we have constant pressure heat addition, similar to Rankine cycle, but this is fully in the gaseous state for the air. So what happens in real life is that you inject some fuel, and the fuel actually combusts. Okay, combustion of the fuel occurs. So the air gets converted to combustion products, which are carbon dioxide and water vapor, and some amount of unused air is also there. Okay, so ultimately at 0.7 you will have carbon dioxide, water vapor, and oxygen and nitrogen from unused air. Okay, so this is the heat addition part from the combustion process that occurs. So this occurs in the combustion chambers of a gas turbine. Then from 7 to 8 is again isentropic expansion in the turbine. So in this case, these are in the gas turbines. Okay, so this occurs in the gas turbine from 7 to 8, and from 8 to 5, typically from in a standalone gas turbine, the 8 to 5 process is not there. So the exhaust gas from the turbine is just released to the atmosphere. Okay, because air is present in abundant supply, you just keep on taking air at state 5, and after the compression, heat addition and expansion, you release the combustion products in the atmosphere like exhaust gases. Okay, like from a car or from an airplane. Okay, it is just released that to the atmosphere. But in this case, what we are going to do is from this 8 to 5, the it will be passed to a heat exchanger. The gases from 8 to 5 will be passed to a heat exchanger and will heat up the working fluid in the steam turbine, which is water generally. Working fluid is water from state 2 to state 3. Okay, it will heat up the water from state 2 to state 3. But for a standalone Brayton cycle, the combustion products are released at state 8 to the atmosphere. Okay, there is no heat exchange process. So now, because these processes are we have two isentropic process and two constant pressure processes. If the inlet temperature is, say, typically it will be around, although I have drawn it as if it is very large, typically this inlet temperature will be around atmospheric temperature, because we are pulling air from the atmosphere. Okay, so the inlet temperature for the air is around atmospheric temperature, and the other parts are fixed. The compression ratio is fixed, and as a result, the turbine expansion ratio is also fixed, pressure ratio. Okay, so this 0.8, you do not have any control over what is the 0.8. So if this is the atmospheric pressure and atmospheric temperature, this 0.5, automatically this 0.8, which is still at atmospheric pressure because you release the gases at atmospheric pressure, will be at a very high temperature, more than 500 degrees centigrade. You cannot control this point, okay, because of the nature of the cycle. So as a result, lot of heat is lost to the atmosphere. You can say that why cannot we bring down the 0.8 so that we can use up more energy in the turbine? Why cannot we bring down the 0.8 to a lower temperature? Can anybody explain? In a Brayton cycle, I will come to the Brayton cycle. I'm not done it in more depth. Let me bring the writing pad so that I can explain quickly the Brayton cycle. let us take a look at a standalone Brayton cycle first, instead of the combined power plant, which will give us some idea. So say you have a standalone Brayton cycle like this. So inlet of air occurs at atmospheric pressure and temperature, okay, which is 300 degrees centigrade and 1 atmospheric pressure. Then this is compressed. Compressor ratio can be around 10 to 20 in typical gas turbine plants. So after compression, the temperature also increases. Okay, the compression occurs isentropically. So if this is 0.1, this is 0.2. I will come to how to calculate. Then we have a constant pressure heat addition. Okay, which occurs as a result of the combustion. Then expansion in the turbine. This is 0.4. 0.4 is not related to 0.2, so it is, although it looks like at the same height because of the. So we release the gases at 0.4, okay, which is at atmospheric pressure and some high temperature. So if the compression ratio is fixed and the heat addition, maximum temperature in the cycle is fixed, based on what? Can anybody say? How do we fix maximum temperature, Tmax, in the gas turbine cycle?
Is it also the turbine materials?
Yes, correct. It is also based on the turbine materials. For gas turbines, the turbine materials are of higher quality super alloys. Okay. So maximum temperature can be around 1200, 1300 degrees centigrade nowadays for modern gas turbines. Very large gas turbine, very high-end gas turbine. So these are not only super alloys but are also of single crystals, okay, and can withstand very large temperature. So this is fixed. Okay. So if this is fixed and the compressor ratio is fixed, say it is 8, compressor ratio is P2 by P1. Okay, this is known as compressor pressure ratio. So this is pressure ratio and denoted by R. This is also fixed. Okay, generally say 10 or 20, something like that, around that value. So this 0.4, can we reduce it to a lower value? Can we expand, keep on expanding this in the turbine so that 0.4 is lower, so that our losses are lower? Otherwise, what is happening is that we are releasing the exhaust gases at a very high temperature, T4, to the atmosphere, and it goes out with very high energy. So can we expand these gases in the turbine more so that we can get more work output and less losses? What is the pressure at 0.4 where we are releasing the exhaust gases? Atmospheric pressure. So if I want to lower the point, pressure will also keep on decreasing in the isentropic process. So if I keep on lowering the point to a lower value, okay, say if I reduce it to some value like this, the pressure at this point will be lower. So then can the exhaust gases go out to the atmosphere at that low pressure, or what will happen in that case? The air from the atmosphere will actually come inside. Okay, there will be backflow, right? So we cannot release the gases at a pressure which is lower than the atmospheric pressure. As a result, you have to release the gases at high temperature. There is no other option. Is it clear to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So then how do we calculate the values of what is the work input required in the compressor and work output from the turbine? Typically, this is a air-based cycle. So we assume ideally that all the properties are of air, fixed properties of air. And we calculate the enthalpy changes in terms of Cp delta T. Okay. So first we try to find out what are the temperatures I will just revisit this part. You must have studied in your thermodynamics course, but still let us revisit. So generally T1 is known. T1 is known from atmospheric condition. T1 is equal to atmospheric temperature, okay, inlet temperature in the gas turbine. And P1 is also known. Okay, T1 and P1 are typically known or given, atmospheric pressure and temperature. Once T1 and P1 are known, we find T2 based on isentropic relation. T2 by T1 is equal to P2 by P1. What is the relation? To the power gamma minus 1 by gamma. Okay. Or R to the power gamma minus 1 by gamma, where R is the pressure ratio. It is also engineering parameter which is fixed. Okay. Typically from 10 to 20 or even larger nowadays. What is gamma? What is the value of gamma for air and what is gamma?
1.4.
T2 by and 1.4.
1.4 for air, it is 1.4. Okay. Gamma is 1.4 for air. It is the ratio of the specific heat, Cp by Cv. You must have studied in thermodynamics. You don't remember it. Ratio of specific heat. Cp and Cv you know, right? You must have studied. Otherwise, how will you do thermodynamic problems?
Yes. Yes.
Cp is the specific heat at constant pressure. Cv is the specific heat at constant volume. Okay. Cp by Cv is 1.4 or gamma, and Cp minus Cv is what? Does anyone know what is Cp minus Cv? For any R, correct. It is R. Okay. So anyway, we don't need this. We only need to know that for air gamma is 1.4 and P2 by P1 ratio is given. So from this we can obtain T2. Okay, T2 can be obtained from this relation. So once you find out T2, T3 is also fixed. So T2 is known and T3 is also known, right? And how will you find T4? Again, because this is an isentropic process, T4 by T3.
We know entropy, we know pressure.
You don't need to use entropy, okay, because this is ideal gas. We know this is an isentropic process. We can find T4 by T3 is equal to P4 by P3 to the power gamma minus 1 by gamma. Isentropic process basically. So because P4 is equal to P1, okay, P4 is equal to P1 and P3 is equal to P2. Okay. So P4 by P3 is what? P1 by P2, 1 by R. Okay. So T4 by T3 is equal to 1 by R to the power gamma minus 1 by gamma. Is it clear? So from this we can find out T4 because T3 is already known. So once you find out T1, T2, T3, T4, all the other things can be directly calculated. How? So what will be the heat addition in the compressor? What is the work input to the compressor? H compressor. H2 minus H1. What will be its value? For air, what will be H2 minus H1? For an ideal gas? Don't know? Don't remember? It will be Cp into T2 minus T1. This is very basic thermodynamics. Okay. So Hc is equal to Cp T2 minus T1 because T2 is already known. You already find out what is heat addition in the compressor. What is the what is the work input to the compressor? What is the work output from the turbine? So I can write this instead of Hc, we will write this as Wc. And this we will write as Wt. This is Cp T3 minus T4. Again, T3 and T4 are known, so this is also known. Correct? And what is the heat addition in the combustion chamber? Let us write this as QH. H3 minus H2. So Cp T2 minus T3 minus T2. So all the things can be found, right? And you can find the efficiency as Wt minus Wc by QH. Is it clear to everyone? Or is there any confusion regarding how to find the efficiency of a Brayton cycle? Very basic relations are needed. Nothing fancy is required. Any questions on Brayton cycle part? Any questions on Brayton cycle? So you should be able to calculate, assuming gamma is equal to 1.4. If other parameters are given to you, you should be able to calculate the efficiency of the Brayton cycle part, okay, or the H values, delta H based on Cp into delta T, okay. Please respond more in the classes, okay, otherwise it looks like I am just speaking to a void. So you should be asking more questions or interacting more in the classes. Because I cannot see you face to face also, it's very difficult in this situation. If it was in a class, I could have asked specifically to some persons, but here I don't know any of you properly. So I cannot visualize also to whom I am asking. So you should be asking more questions so that I can give more answers. Any doubts you should ask, don't hesitate. So anyway, this is what a typical Brayton cycle looks like. Now because this T4, you can easily find out that T4 will be very large temperature as compared to T1. Okay. So because T4 is very large and we are wasting lot of energy, instead of passing it directly to atmosphere, what is done in a combined cycle plant is that you take these exhaust gases and pass it to a heat exchanger. Okay. And in the heat exchange process, the temperature of the T4 gases is reduced to T1. It is not again passed back to the cycle. It is exhausted after the after the heat exchanger, and fresh air is brought, because you cannot circulate the same gases again and again. Why cannot we circulate the same gases again and again in a gas turbine, unlike a steam turbine where the working fluid is circulated again and again? For a gas turbine, we cannot circulate the working fluid again and again. Why is it so?
Sir, the combustion already took place, so now.
Correct, correct. So the combustion here is internal combustion, right? So it happens inside the, like, with the air. So the working fluid gets changed from air to the combustion products. So the amount of air is reduced. You cannot again combust what is already combusted. On the other hand, for steam power plants, the heat addition is not internal. So we don't have internal combustion. We have external combustion. So steam power plants are external combustion cycles. Gas turbine plants are internal combustion cycles. Okay. So for external combustion, the working fluid is not affected. So you can recirculate the working fluid again and again. Okay. Whereas for gas turbine, you have to eject the working fluid. Same as IC engines, internal combustion engines, like say Otto cycle or diesel cycle, where the gases need to be exhausted and fresh air has to be taken up. Okay, same thing happens in gas turbine. So we exhaust the air after the heat exchange process for a combined cycle plant, and this heat rejected from 4 to 1 is taken up by the Rankine cycle. So Rankine cycle does not need any boiler. Okay, there is no need for any boiler. The entire heat addition is done from the exhaust gas heat released. Okay, so let us come back to the cycle. So this entire heat addition from 2 to 3 occurs from the heat removal from 8 to 5. So in this case, it is not restricted to the two-phase region. The heat addition is not restricted to the two-phase region, unlike the Rankine cycle plant. Can anybody say why this is the case? So here the heat exchange is between 8 to 5 and from 2 to 3. So we are also using up heat addition from the Brayton cycle for 2 to 3 and from 2 to 2 dash and from 2 double dash to 3. Okay. So these parts also. So why is this the case? Unlike Rankine cycle plants.
Sir,
Answers?
can you repeat once again question?
Question is, for the combined Rankine cycle plant, we had heat addition from the 8 to 5, and this heat addition was done only for the point from 2 dash to 2 double dash. The rest of the heat addition for the Rankine cycle at the bottom was done using a boiler from 2 to 2 dash and 2 double dash to 3 was done using a boiler. In this case, for the gas turbine Rankine cycle combined plant, the entire heat addition from 2 to 3 means including this low temperature region as well as in the superheated region is done using the gas turbine plant. Okay, so there is no separate boiler at all for going from 2 to 2 dash, which is the subcooled region, as well as in the superheated region from 2 double dash to 3. This region is also heated up using the exhaust gases. We don't need a separate boiler. Okay. Why is the heat addition not only restricted to the two-phase region using the exhaust gases, unlike the Rankine cycle plant?
So because in this Brayton cycle, higher
Yes.
temperature can be reached
Yes.
because the
So
exhaust gas is released.
exhaust gas temperature does not remain fixed, right? So the heat exchange here occurs non-isothermally. So in the Rankine cycle, because of phase change, the heat exchange occurred isothermally. So the exhaust gas, so not the exhaust gas, but the temperature during the heat exchange process was fixed. Here, the heat exchange, it occurs at constant pressure, but the temperature keeps on reducing. So the 0.8 will be at a very high temperature as compared to 0.5. Okay. As a result, the 0.8 is higher than temperature of 0.3 itself. So the entire heat exchange can be done from the exhaust gases. Okay. And it will not also lead to too much irreversibility, because this temperature is also high, means it is also going higher from 2 to 3, and similarly the temperature from 5 to 8, this is also increasing. So using a counterflow heat exchanger, we can get good heat exchange process for this case. Okay. So the entire heat addition is done using the exhaust gas energy. If Y is the ratio of the working fluid, so if Y is the ratio of, if m dot S is the mass flow rate of steam and m dot G is the mass flow rate of air in the Brayton cycle, we can define a parameter called Y, which is the ratio of the mass flow rate of the working fluid, where Y is defined as m dot S by m dot G. Okay. So for 1 kg of air, okay, what is the mass flow rate of the water? Y is the definition such that for 1 kg of air, 1 kg per second of air, what is the mass flow rate of water? Okay. So we'll come to the calculation, but let us take a look
Sir,
at this. Yes. Tell me.
sir, this diagram of Brayton cycle is it like it is made on above Rankine cycle to just make it easier to correlate, or it is to is it to made to scale like it is?
No, no, it is not made to scale. Your point is correct. Okay. This 0.5 will be much lower and 0.8 will be higher. It is just to, here it is easier to draw two separate cycles, though that's why I have drawn it like this. It can go like this also. Okay. Like for
Okay, sir.
example, you understood, I think, my point, but I will, for others' benefit, I will just show. It could have gone like this. typically it will go like this, something like this. Okay, this is much sharper, this line. Okay, and it will not also, the entropy is also not going from 1 to 4. It can be any other region also. Why this control Z is not working? Now this line I cannot remove. Anyway, so what I am saying is that it is, yes, it is just so that we can understand. This can be here also, like this point, like this. Okay, the gas turbine can be. My drawing is very inaccurate, but you will get the idea. Because the entropy, it need not be that the entropy of 0.5 is like the same as entropy at 0.1. This is air, this is completely different. This is water, completely different. It is just so that it looks easier for us to correlate. I have drawn it like this. Okay. It's a good point that you have raised. So, how does this look like if we draw the component diagram? So, we have the compressor process from 5 to 6. I will increase the size of this. Compressor process from 5 to 6, which is isentropic compression. Okay, isentropic means what? Reversible adiabatic. Okay, so what is the relation between pressure and specific volume during isentropic compression, or pressure and density? You should remember all this. These are very fundamental things. In your entire life, these equations will be used. PV to the power gamma is constant, right? Very basic. PV to the power gamma is constant for an isentropic process. Okay. So, or P by rho to the power gamma is constant. Okay. So, from 6 to 7, then constant pressure heat addition. So, heat addition is equal to Cp into T6, T7 minus T6, as we have already studied. Then isentropic expansion. Okay. Again, PV to the power gamma is constant. Okay. Or P7 by P8 is equal to V8 by V7 to the power gamma. From there, we can find the relation of temperature that I have written. T7 by T8 is equal to P7 by P8 to the power gamma minus 1 by gamma. The relation that we have written. Okay. These are very famous relations. Like T2 by T1 is equal to P2 by P1 to the power gamma minus 1 by gamma. This is for an isentropic process, reversible adiabatic process. So these relations you should know. Or you can derive from the relation of PV to the power gamma is constant and ideal gas law, that PV is equal to RT. Using these two laws, these two rules, you can derive that P2 by P1 is equal to T2 by T1 to the power gamma minus 1 by gamma. Then 8 to 5 is the heat rejection, okay, in the heat exchanger. So which is done using a heat exchanger. Okay. So this heat exchanger replaces the boiler in the Rankine cycle. Okay. So this is the heat addition that occurs from 2 to 3 occurs in the heat exchanger. Rest of the Rankine cycle looks similar to simple Rankine cycle. From 3 to 4 is the expansion in the turbine. From 4 to 1 is the condensation process, and from 1 to 2 is the heat input, work input to the pump. So the net heat addition to this cycle, what is the net heat addition to the cycle, combined cycle? And what is the net heat rejection from the combined cycle? If we consider the entire cycle as a single entity, what is the net heat addition or what is the net heat rejection from the cycle? Answers.
So 4 to 1 is only
Heat rejection, net heat rejection, because there is no heat rejection from the gas turbine plant. So only heat rejection from the combined plant is from 4 to 1, which is H4 minus H1. Okay. What is the net heat addition to the cycle?
From 6 to 7.
Only 6 to 7. Okay, because there is no heat addition from 2 to 3. This occurs internally. So if I look at the cycle from external point of view, only heat addition is from 6 to 7 and only heat rejection is from 4 to 1. What is the heat addition? H7 minus H6 or Cp T7 minus T6. Okay. So I can also draw a simple schematic diagram looking like this. Say Q1 is the, I will keep this open. Okay. Q1 is the heat addition in the gas turbine plant. W net 1 is the work output from the gas turbine plant, which is WT1 minus WC. WT1 is the gas turbine work output. WC is the work input to the compressor. Okay. So net work output is Q1 minus Q2. Okay. What is Q2? Q2 is the heat rejected by the gas turbine plant, which is what? Which is H8 minus H5, heat rejected by the gas turbine plant. This is same as the heat that is gained by the steam turbine plant. Okay. So Q2 is also equal to the heat gained by the steam turbine plant, which is H3 minus H2. So H8 minus H5 into m dot G will be equal to m dot S into H3 minus H2. Okay. Because the mass flow rates are not same. We have to keep that in mind. Okay. So the same heat addition is taken up by the same heat is taken up by the steam turbine plant. Okay. And then we have the net work output from the steam turbine plant, which is equal to turbine work output of the steam turbine minus work input to the pump. Okay. After net work output, whatever heat is rejected is equal to Q3, which is H4 minus H1. M dot S H4 minus H1. Okay. So net heat addition to this cycle is this part and net heat rejection is this part. Okay. This Q2 is internal. So if we combine these two together, we can find out the overall efficiency of the cycle. Okay. So let us write this. I will keep this open. Okay. What is Q1? H7 minus H6, heat addition in the Brayton cycle, which is Cp T7 minus T6 for a constant Cp. What is Q2? H8 minus H5, which is Cp T8 minus T5. Okay. So if we assume that the mass flow rate in the Brayton cycle is 1, these are true. Okay. So for one mass flow rate in the Brayton cycle, what is the mass flow rate in the Rankine cycle? It is equal to Y. Okay. So the heat addition in the Rankine cycle is Y into H3 minus H2. Okay. Mass flow rate in the Rankine cycle is Y. So Y into H3 minus H2 is the heat addition in the Rankine cycle. And heat rejection in the Rankine cycle is Y into H4 minus H1. So what is the energy balance in the heat exchanger? What is the, how will you find the value of Y? Answers? What is the energy balance in the heat exchanger?
So m dot G into H8 minus H5 equals to m dot S into H3 minus H2.
Correct. So in terms of Y, how can we write it? Because we want to use this equation. We don't want to separately have m dot G and m dot S. We will assume that the mass flow rate in the gas turbine plant is 1 and in the steam turbine plant is Y. So 1 into H8 minus H5 is equal to Y into H3 minus H2. Is it clear to everyone else? So energy balance is H8 minus H5 is equal to Y into H3 minus H2. Okay, or Y is equal to H8 minus H5 by H3 minus H2. So this is how we can get the value of Y. So for 1 kg per second flow rate of air, we can find out what is the mass flow rate of steam. So then from the power required, you can find out what should be the mass flow rate of air, overall mass flow rate of air, and accordingly you can find out based on Y what will be the mass flow rate of steam. So if the mass flow rate of air is 100 kg per second, you have to multiply that by Y. to get the mass rate of steam. Clear? Please respond. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
So the net work output from the cycle is W net 1 plus W net 2 and net heat addition is Q1. Okay. Or we can write this in another way. So always from a heat engine, the net work output is equal to the heat addition minus the heat rejection. That you have studied in basic thermodynamics. In a heat engine, the net work output is equal to the net heat input, right? Net work output is equal to net heat input. That is what first law of thermodynamics tells us. So what is the net heat input in this combined cycle? What is the net heat input in the combined cycle? Net heat input, not the heat input in the boiler. Okay. What is the net heat exchange?
Q1 minus Q3.
Q1 minus Q3. So the net work output W net 1 plus W net 2 should be equal to Q1 minus Q3. Okay. So, or you can say that W net 1 is equal to Q1 minus Q2 and W net 2 is equal to Q2 minus Q3. So if you add these two, so this is Q1 minus Q2 plus Q2 minus Q3. So Q1 minus Q3. Okay. And heat addition in the from the high temperature source, which is Q1. Okay. So the efficiency can be written as Q1 minus Q3 by Q1 or 1 minus Q3 by Q1. This is the very basic equation that you have studied in thermodynamics. Okay. Efficiency is 1 minus QL by QH. We write it as 1 minus QL by QH, where QL is the heat lost at low temperature to the low temperature reservoir and the QH is the heat gained from the high temperature reservoir. Is there any doubt or any confusion regarding this equation? Eta is equal to 1 minus Q3 by Q1, or is it clear to everyone? Very basic of this, very basic thermodynamics, right? So now we can write eta as 1 minus Q3 is what? Y into H4 minus H1. Okay. Y into H4 minus H1. And Q1 is H7 minus H6. So we can find out the efficiency of the overall cycle. Efficiency is 1 minus Y H4 minus H1 by H7 minus H6. How will we calculate H7 minus H6? It is written here CP T7 minus T6. Okay. And how will we calculate H4 minus H1? This part.
We already have like
We already know how to calculate, right? Based for a Rankine cycle, H4 minus H1. We will be able to find out 0.4 based on entropy is constant from 0.3
pressure.
and pressure. So this point quality we will find, and based on the quality we can find H4. So H4 minus H1 like a simple Rankine cycle. So this part we will treat like a simple Rankine cycle. Only thing is that instead of the boiler you have the heat exchange process. Nothing else has changed. Okay. So you can find what is the efficiency. So for the Brayton cycle, I have already discussed T6 by T5 is equal to P6 by P5 to the power gamma minus 1 by gamma, okay, which is pressure ratio Rp to the power gamma minus 1 by gamma. Or T6 can be calculated as T5 into Rp to the power gamma minus 1 by gamma. We have discussed. Similarly, T7 by T8 is P7 by P8 to the power gamma minus 1 by gamma, which is equal to P6 by P5 to the power gamma minus 1 by gamma, or Rp to the power gamma minus 1 by gamma. So T6 can be found because T5 is known to us, and T8 can be found because T7 is known to us based on the maximum temperature in the cycle. So T8 is equal to T7 into 1 by Rp to the power gamma minus 1 by gamma. So all the temperatures are known. Once all the temperatures are known, all the parameters for Brayton cycle can be calculated. Okay. So we can find out the efficiency overall of the plant. So for any combined cycle plants, okay, where the entire heat exchange from one cycle to the other cycle occurs through a heat exchanger, we can write the efficiency as, if you follow this diagram, efficiency is W net 1 plus W net 2 divided by Q1, right? W net 1 plus, so net work output by heat addition, overall heat addition in the at high temperature. Okay. So W net 1 can be written as Q1 minus Q2 by Q1, and W net 2 can be written as Q2 minus Q3 by Q1. Okay. So W net 1 is difference of heat input minus heat output. Similarly, W net 2 is difference of heat input minus heat output. Okay. So Q1 minus Q2 by Q1 plus Q2 minus Q3 by Q1. Or this can be written as 1 minus Q2 by Q1. And the second part, we can take out Q2 by Q1 common. Okay. So if I take Q2 by Q1 common, the first term is 1 and second term becomes minus Q3 by Q2. Okay. So 1 minus Q3 by Q2. So what is 1 minus Q2 by Q1? What is 1 minus Q2 by Q1 in terms of efficiency? Efficiency of Brayton or Rankine cycle. I will keep this diagram open. Okay, this is the efficiency. Answers.
So like the efficiency of the Brayton cycle.
Efficiency of the Brayton cycle. Good. Eta B. Okay, let us call it eta B. Efficiency of the Brayton cycle. What is 1 minus Q3 by Q2?
Efficiency of Rankine cycle.
Efficiency of Rankine cycle. And Q2 by Q1, how can I write in terms of efficiency?
One minus efficiency.
1 minus efficiency of Brayton cycle. Okay, good. So combined efficiency can be written as Brayton cycle efficiency eta B plus 1 minus eta B into eta R, where eta B is the Brayton cycle, individual Brayton cycle efficiency, and eta R is the individual Rankine cycle efficiency. Okay. So combined cycle efficiency can be written as eta B plus eta R minus eta B eta R. Okay. So if you know the individual cycle efficiencies, you can find directly the combined cycle efficiency. Okay. So I have written also all these things. So eta CC is the combined cycle efficiency, eta B is the Brayton cycle efficiency, eta R is the Rankine cycle efficiency. This is true for any combined cycle power plants where the entire heat exchange occurs from one cycle to the other cycle. Okay, so there is no boiler. Where there is no boiler, entire heat exchange occurs from one cycle to other cycle. This is true. Okay, where the heat loss from one cycle is the total heat gain by the other cycle. So eta combined can be written as eta Brayton plus eta Rankine minus eta Brayton eta Rankine. So I will put some numbers also. Say typical Brayton cycle efficiency is 0.4 and Rankine cycle efficiency is 0.3. So the combined cycle efficiency will be equal to 0.4 plus 0.3 minus 0.4 into 0.3. Okay, which is equal to overall equal to 0.58. So you can see that ideal cases efficiency increases significantly by using the combined cycle plant. And physically, why this increase is occurring in the efficiency? Because you are not wasting the heat that was being rejected to the atmosphere by the exhaust gases. We are using up the heat for heating the Rankine cycle. Okay, for doing the heat addition in the Rankine cycle. That's why overall we are getting an increase in efficiency. Okay. Any questions regarding this combined cycle plants? So this is very easy to calculate. I have given one problem also in the assignment sheet, but you will be able to solve any other problems also, not very difficult. You can go through the problems in the books also. So for simple Brayton cycle, you can refer to the book by Chengel-Bowles to revise once more what is the simple Brayton cycle. so that you can calculate the heat exchange processes for a simple Brayton cycle. Rankine cycle we have already studied. So I have also noted for the Brayton cycle, but to feel comfortable, you can go to the book once. And then easily you will be able to find out the values for a combined cycle. It's not difficult to find. So I will take a break at this point and we will again start discussing after 5 minutes. Okay. Think about if you have any questions. So we'll continue our discussion. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
See the screen also?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So we have finished the thermodynamics part of the course. Okay. So this was so up to this was the thermodynamics part of the course. You can solve the problems that I have given. You can also solve some additional problems from the books. So now what we will do, we will go into the next part of the course. Next part of the course, rest of the course is on the individual components. So we will study about the steam generation process, then means the steam generators, boiler and other things briefly, and then we will go into turbines, which are the most important part, one of the most important part of the course. Steam turbines, nozzles and steam turbines, and then finally condensers and cooling towers. Okay, so all the major components that are present in a thermal power plant except pumps. So pumps we are not going to cover in this course because that is part of fluid mechanics, fluid machinery. Okay. So anyway, so let us go to steam generators. Okay. Today I will just give you an overview, and in the from the next class we will go into some mathematical details of steam generators. There is not much mathematical details that we can study for steam generators in this course. We will go through some particular aspects which needs mathematical treatment. Okay. Apart from that, all the other things are just more like a description. So you have to just read from the book, and I will also go through them today very briefly. But I suggest that you go through the book by L. Wakil. Okay. So there is a chapter on steam generators. So steam generation process. You go through that chapter. Maybe I will give you an official assignment also, reading assignment. So let me see. Okay, so steam generators, when we consider steam generation process, so can you see the presentation?
Yes, sir.
When we consider steam generation process, basically it is not a single device. It's a combination of large number of things ultimately which converts the water to steam. In the thermodynamic cycle, when we are studying Rankine cycles, we are just considering them to be just a single process, heat addition in the boiler. But actually that part is one of the major parts of a thermal power plant. So you have the furnace. In the furnace, combustion is occurring. We will see all these things, but I will just give you a brief overview right now. In the furnace, there is combustion that is occurring, and then the furnaces are very large. Okay, very large inverted U-shaped devices. Okay, so as tall as a few storied buildings, and the combustion gases, combustion products flow over bundle of tubes. Large number of tubes are present through which water passes, and because of heat exchange, the water in the water tubes gets vaporized, and this vapor and water mixture is collected in a large drum which is known as steam drum. I will show you some pictures also. So from the steam drum, the steam is extracted, and then it is passed to a device called superheater for the superheating part. Then it goes to the turbine. From the turbine, it comes back for reheating. Again, it goes back to the turbine, and then it goes to the from the turbine part. So that part is not part of the steam generation from the turbine. So turbine part is separate, and then it goes to the condenser. So condenser is also separate. From the condensate fluid is pumped using a series of pumps. So from the pump, the feed water passes to the feed water heaters. Those are also separate. Then from the feed water, after the feed water heater, comes back to the furnace and comes back to a section which is known as economizer, where the heating for the subcooled liquid occurs. I will show you all these things, so don't worry about it right now. Okay, so heating of subcooled liquid occurs, and then it again recirculates back to the steam drum. So if I go back to our simple Rankine cycle, any diagram will be solved. Okay. So ignore the gas turbine, only consider the simple Rankine cycle part. Let us go to another cycle, this one. Okay. Only consider the below cycle. Okay. Don't ignore the top one. So from 2 dash to 2 dash part is known as heat addition in the economizer. Okay, we will see what is an economizer later on. But this part we can see is separate in an actual furnace because this part considers only liquid water. Okay, so 2 is at liquid condition and 2 dash is saturated liquid. So this liquid is heated to saturated liquid condition. From 2 dash to 2 double dash is the vaporization process. It occurs in the evaporator, or we will see it is also called as water valves. Okay, evaporator. So this part is separate, and from 2 double dash to 3 is again separate because here only gas is, like the vapor is heated to superheated condition. So from 2 double dash to 3 is separate. So these three are 3 separate parts in the furnace. Okay, so that we are going to see. First part is known as economizer, heating in the economizer. Second part is the heating in the evaporator, or the actual boiling process, and third part is the superheating process. Let us come back to our power plant. So for generating, so I will anyway supply this material to all of you. Let me check whether we have uploaded it already or not. And you can read about these parts from the book also. I have already uploaded steam generators. You can check. So it is required for generating either saturated or superheated steam, and there are various parts: economizer, boiler, superheater, reheater. Okay, so I have given 2 separate bullet points. Why these 2 separate bullet points? Economizer, boiler, superheater, reheater. This deals with the steam part, the working fluid. There is other equipment like pulverizer, stoker, burner, fans, stack is chimney. Okay, emission control, ash handling equipment. These equipment handle the air part or the combustion part. Okay, so there is the water side where the water vapor and other things are there, and then we also have to consider how the combustion occurs outside the water, means they are not in touch. So it is external combustion, right? So it does not mix with the waters, obviously. So how the coal is brought, how it is crushed using a pulverizer, then stoker and burner actually feeds this air and coal mixture to the furnace, how the combustion occurs in the furnace, then how the combustion products are there are also emission control for the combustion products so that you can remove harmful gases, and ash handling equipment to remove ashes. Some ashes are found in the furnace, and rest of the combustion products passes through the chimney and it is released at a higher means quite a bit of height. Okay. So let us take a look at all these things. So before that, we will go through a quick history of the steam generators. What are the different types of steam generators that have been developed over the years, and then we will see what is the current type of steam generators that is used for large power plants. So initially, even from very old times, prehistoric times, not prehistoric, sorry, like the historic times, the steam generators that were developed for other purposes. Obviously, turbines were not there. So steam generation process was done using something which is like a shell and tube heat exchanger. Okay, it looks like a shell and tube heat exchanger. So where in the shell part the water was present. So in the shell part, which is shown here by the blue to greenish color, okay, water is present, and there are tubes within the shell. Okay, there are tubes within the shell shown by the orange color. So inside this tube, hot gases pass. Okay. So inside the tubes there is flow of hot gases. So what happens is that you burn coal in a furnace. Okay, you just put some coal intermittently. You keep on putting coal, and it gets combusted, and the combustion gases are flown through pipes, which flow through the. So these pipes are present within the shell. Okay, and the combustion products passes through the pipes and goes out from the other side as exhaust gases. Okay, similar to whatever was present in old steam engines. Okay, if you've seen very old steam engines, people used to manually put coal there in the furnace, and this combustion would have occurred, and it would have gone through the pipes, the combustion products, and will be released outside, and the steam used to be generated and used to pass through the engine and again released outside. Okay, so and the water is contained in the shell, and because of heating it goes from saturated liquid to saturated vapor condition in the shell. Okay, so it cannot go to superheated condition in the shell because you have certain amount of liquid always available. Okay, so if you have certain amount of liquid always available in the shell, instead of going to superheated condition, what will happen is that more and more liquid will get converted to vapor. Until the entire liquid gets converted to vapor, you cannot have superheated vapor. So for the superheating part, what is done is that you extract steam from the top, which is saturated steam. If you just extract from the top, it is saturated steam, and then you pass it again back to the back within the fire tubes. Okay, these tubes are known as fire tubes. So back within the fire tubes, so that the superheated steam can be heated to, sorry, the saturated steam can be heated to superheated steam, and ultimately you get superheated steam as outlet from the other side. Okay, so this was the entire process. So this was very common, but after this there was a significant improvement that was done, and by making a simple change, instead of containing the steam in the outside shell and the fire in the fire tubes, the fire or the combustion products was contained in the outside shell, and the steam and water was contained inside the tubes. Okay, so the second type of steam generators are known as water tube boiler. The first type is known as fire tube boilers because the combustion products passes through tubes, okay, or fire tubes. The second type, in the second type, the combustion products flows outside the tubes, and through the tubes the water passes. And let us take a look at this. Okay, so again combustion of fuel occurs, and after combustion the hot gases pass through the shell and goes out from the other side. Okay, whereas the water is brought to a drum. Okay, from the drum the water is either it is pumped to the top drum, or because of natural convection it rises up, and it passes through tubes. Okay, water tubes. These tubes are known as water tubes. So it passes through the water tubes and goes to the steam drum. Okay, so in the steam drum we have a mixture of liquid and vapor. So the vapor can be taken out from the top as saturated vapor and passed to another device, which is again is present within the furnace. Okay, so this saturated vapor now gets heated to superheated vapor, and the superheated vapor goes out from the other side. Okay, so the main difference is that here the water is contained in tubes. That's why it is called as water tube. Can anyone say what is the big advantage? This has a very big advantage. Okay, as compared to fire tube boilers. What can be a advantage of these water tube boilers as compared to the fire tube boilers? So I will give an hint. It has nothing to do with the heat exchange process. It has nothing to do with the heat exchange process. Okay.
Gases exhaust.
Gas is exhausted there also, so there is not much difference. Uh, Here the gases pass through the tubes and the water is contained in the shell. Here the gases are in the shell and water passes through the tube. That is the only difference. There can be different designs. It could have been designed like this also. But water would have passed through the tubes and gases would have been in the shell. Okay. So there is a big advantage of water tube boilers, and it is nothing to do with the heat exchange process. What can it be? Think about all the other what else can change? Or think out of the box.
So maybe something related to leakage or
Not really, but something related to pressure. What can be that something related to pressure? So typically you need steam at high pressure, right, to run a turbine. We need steam at what type of pressures we have discussed. Generally we need very high pressure, like 100 atmospheric pressure or even higher, 200 atmospheric pressure, right? So the steam is, how does that pressure increase occurs in the steam? Is there a pressure increase in the steam, or the pressure was already high when it is brought to the furnace?
It is already high.
It was already high because of the pumping process. So the water itself comes, whatever is the water itself comes at high pressure. Here also water itself comes at high pressure. Okay, 100 atmospheric pressure. Now think of these two cases. In both cases, water is at say 100 atmospheric pressure. Okay, so which case will have higher stresses? In the tubes. Do you know what is Hooft stress? Have you studied what is Hooft stress? Circumferential stress. So if I have two tubes, two cylinders of different radius with same pressure of the fluid inside, okay, like the two gas cylinders, one with a smaller diameter, one with a larger diameter. I have two gas cylinders. Okay, say at home I have two gas cylinders, one with a smaller diameter, one with a larger diameter. Pressures are same in both the cylinders inside. Which cylinder will have higher stresses in the material, cylinder wall material? You have not studied Hooft stress? Pressure vessels have you studied? In your design courses you must have studied.
yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So how does the stress depend on the diameter if the pressure is constant? How does it depend on the pressure? Do you remember any of the equation? PD by 2T or something like that was there, some equation, right? Hooft stress. So the stresses is proportional to pressure, stress is proportional to diameter, and inversely proportional to thickness. Okay. So if I have this is understandable. If I have a thin material, stress will be higher. If I have a thin material, stresses will be higher. If I have larger pressure, stresses will be higher. And if I have a larger diameter, stresses will be higher for the same pressure and thickness. So just by making one small change, so in the fire tube boiler, the water or the high pressure steam is contained in the outside shell. Okay. And because this is at high pressure, the stresses in the walls are very high because the diameter of the shell is much larger. Okay. In the water tube boiler, the high pressure steam is within the water tubes. Tube diameters are much less than the shell diameter, right? So because the tube diameter is much less, for the same pressure, you can have much lower stresses. Or in the other way around, to get the same stresses, you can increase the pressure much. So the main advantage or main disadvantage of fire tube boilers were that we could not rise the pressure to very high values. So fire tube boilers were limited to very low pressures of water. Otherwise, this would burst. Okay, it could not contain the pressure. Okay, it will need a very thick shell. Whereas the water tube boilers can handle much higher pressure. Okay, is it clear to everyone? This is a practical advantage. Okay, nothing to do with heat transfer. But because of this, nowadays all modern boilers are water tube boilers, not fire tube boilers. Because the exhaust gases or the combustion products are not at high pressure, right? Combustion occurs at normal pressure, but the water needs to be at very high pressure. So if water has to be contained in very high pressure environment, if the diameter of the tubes is less, then the stresses will be less. If the diameter is more, because the stresses are proportional to diameter, PD by 2T or something like that. I forgot the exact formula, PD by 2T or 4T, something like that. Okay, so stresses are directly proportional to diameter. Because the shell diameter is much larger than the tube diameter, the stresses are much more in a fire tube boiler as compared to water tube boiler. Clear to everyone? Advantages of water tube boilers. So nowadays all boilers, modern boilers, some sort of modification of water tube boilers, because you can achieve high pressure. The fire tube boilers are rarely used, not in much use. Only if you need low pressure steam, then only fire tube boiler makes sense. Otherwise, it does not make any sense.
But can't we have smaller tubes in the air?
In the shell? No, see, ultimately you have to do a heat exchange, right? So if you have smaller tubes, smaller tube means smaller shell, or how will you have two separate tubes? The fire also passes through tubes, and if you have water also passing through tubes, then how will the heat exchange occur? The heat exchange will not occur, right? Because there needs to be a common surface area. So one of the material has to pass through the tubes, and other material has to be in a shell for the heat exchange to occur, because this is like a shell and tube heat exchanger. So either the combustion product passes through the tubes or the water passes through the tubes. If the water passes through the tubes, combustion products are in the shell. Okay. So you cannot have two separate tubes side by side, because there won't be any common surface for the heat exchange to occur. Is it clear? Does this answer your question? Why so silent?
Sir, it's so
I could not hear what you are saying. Can you ask your question again? What are you saying? I could not hear it.
no, sir. I was just telling it. There's so much noise around. That's why. No,
Okay, fine. Okay. So yes, so either one fluid has to be in the shell. Okay. So that's why initially people thought that it is very easy to pass the combustion products through the tubes. Okay. Design is simpler, but because water can just be put in the shell and it will just steam will be generated in the shell like a pressure cooker. Okay. But later on this modified designs came and it was found to be much more useful. But here you need to pump the water and all these associated difficulties are there. But still it is, you can go to much higher pressure. If you can go to much higher pressure in a Rankine cycle, what is the advantage? If the boiler pressure is much higher, what is the advantage? Why we do it high pressure? What will increase if we can increase the pressure?
The efficiency, like
Efficiency will increase. Heat addition will occur at very high temperature. So efficiency will increase. Okay. So because pressure is related to temperature, so saturation temperature corresponding to high pressure will be also higher. So you will get much higher efficiency. That's why modern say thermal power plants have much higher efficiency as compared to older plants. Then there were different types of modification of water tube boiler. One is known as straight tube boiler, as you can see here. Okay, there is a large steam drum, and you have two channels, and then which are connected through the water tubes, and the water passes through the tubes. Water comes down, cold water comes down from one side, and through the slope tubes uh, they go upward because of natural convection. Because the water becomes lighter as more and more vapor is generated. Okay, the mixture becomes lighter and it tries to go up, and it goes up from the other side. Okay, and there are a lot of baffles. Baffles means these twisted paths. Okay, which restrict the gas flow. So the hot gases has to flow through a very long path. Okay, a very elongated or a complex path, so that there is more time for heat exchange to occur. If the gases flow directly from one side to the other side, the heat exchange time will be reduced. So there is a complicated structure of baffles like these obstructions, so that the flow of gases, the path required for the flow of gases can be increased, so that there is more time for heat exchange. Okay, so this is one variation. Another variation was the bent tube boiler. These are all historical. Okay, I will show you modern type. So here the tubes itself were bent, and there were multiple steam drums that were used, and these had their own advantages, okay, related to stresses. And the gases used to again pass through a lot of baffles. So we will come to the modern steam drum. Unfortunately, my diagram is very hazy because I got a very poor quality picture on the internet, but I will try to explain what happens. Okay. So in a modern boiler, okay, it is better to reduce the size, or let us keep it large. I will just explain what is there so that you understand. Anyway, it is getting recorded. So the modern steam generator is shaped like a large U-shaped device. Okay, it's a very large building. Okay, it's a very large U-shaped building. Okay, and what happens is that, so I will go through each of the individual part. What is happening here? So the ambient air from outside is brought and is pushed by a fan. Okay, this fan is known as forced draft fan. Forced draft because it is forcing the air to a higher pressure. Okay, then the air passes through a heat exchanger and he exchanges heat with the exhausting gases. Okay, so the air gets heated. Air gets heated by around 100 degrees centigrade from ambient condition. Okay, so this heated air, now it is divided into two parts. Okay, one part directly goes to the furnace. Second part of the hot air is passed to a device which is known as pulverizer. Okay, so what is this pulverizer? The pulverizer is a device which pulverizes the coal, crushes the coal. Okay, so the coal is brought from its storage space. It is not shown here in this diagram. The coal is brought from its storage space uh, using conveyor belts. Large conveyor belts are present, and the coal is brought and put through crushers. There are large crushers. Okay, this crushes the coal into smaller chunks, and then it is pulverized using rollers to very small fine dust. Okay, the coal is crushed and then it is pulverized using rollers to very fine dust. Okay, so this very fine dust is there in the pulverizer and the hot air passes through it. So this hot air takes the fine coal dust with it. Okay, so this coal air mixture, it behaves like a fluid and it is passed into the furnace and is injected into the furnace from different sides, not from a single injection point, but from all sides of the furnace. Okay, it is injected in such a way so that there is a circulation that is formed. So that a circulation is formed inside the furnace. Okay, so that there is good mixing of the air and the coal. Okay, the hot air that is coming from here and the coal air mixture, there is good mixing. It is ignited by an igniter and combustion occurs in this region. Okay, so this is for the path of the air. After combustion, what happens? The hot air, this goes up because it is hot, it goes up, and then while going up, it exchanges heat with the surrounding walls. Okay, the surrounding walls contain large number of tubes containing water. I will come to that. Okay, so it loses some of its heat. Still, it is at very high temperature. The initial temperature of this is very high, much larger than 1000 degrees centigrade. Okay, so it loses some of its temperature. Still, it is at very high temperature. Then it is passes through a heat exchanger, which is known as the superheater. Okay, So this superheater is not a separate device. You have large number of coils contained in the furnace building itself. Okay. So the hot gases pass through the furnace building. It continues passing through the furnace building and goes over these coils. And there is heat exchange, and it hits the steam, and the hot gases, the temperature is reduced further. Then it passes through again another set of coils, which is for the reheater. Again the temperature is reduced. Then it passes through another set of coils, which is known as the economizer. Okay. Again the temperature of the gases are reduced. So the gases are exchanging heat not only for steam generation but also for superheating, reheating, and in the economizer. I will come to these parts later on. So after this, the gases is at is at lower temperature, say around 250 degrees centigrade. Okay. Then it passes through another heat exchanger, which is known as the air preheater, where it is the incoming air, incoming ambient temperature air. Okay. And then this is so the diagram does not show it, but these gases are then passed through. What is this called? So emission control equipment. Okay. So basically there are electrostatic precipitators. These electrostatic precipitators remove the impurities, dust and other particles that are present. Okay. And then there is another big fan which pulls the air, okay, which is known as induced draft fan. And finally, the gases are passed to a large tall chimney, and the gases go out from the chimney. Okay, the chimney is also known as the stack. Okay, the chimney is also known as the stack. So apart from this, what happens during the combustion? Some part of the coal contains impurities and cannot take part in the combustion. So this part results in formation of ash. Okay, this ash is contained. This is the incombustible part. So there around 5 to 10% of the coal cannot get any combustion. Okay, some part is present which does not take part in the combustion. So this drops down as ash. This is known as fly ash, and it drops down and is removed. Okay, using ash handling equipment, and can be used up for other purposes. Okay, for landfilling or some other purposes. So this is for the air side. Any questions? Yes.
No, sir.
So what happens to the water side? Okay. So the water comes in. Water comes in from where? It comes in from the feed water heaters. Okay. We have studied about thermodynamic cycles now. So we know that the water comes in from the feed water heaters. Okay. It comes in at a moderate temperature from the feed water heater, but it is still in subcooled state. It needs to be heated to the saturated liquid state. So it passes through a large number of coils. Okay. The coils are held within this furnace, and there is heat exchange with the flue gases. Okay. Because this temperature is lower, this part is present towards the exit of the gases, where the gas temperature is significantly lower. Okay. Still there can be sufficient heating. The superheater cannot be put at this place. Why cannot the superheater be put at this place and the economizer at the other place? What will be the temperature range of the superheater and what will be the temperature range of the economizer? Which part is handled by the superheater and which part by the economizer? Economizer handles from 2 dash, right? And from 2 double dash to 3 is the superheater. So economizer temperatures are much lower as compared to superheater, right? So as a result, you need gases to be at much higher temperature so that heat exchange can occur in the superheater. But much lower temperature gas can also do the heat exchange in the economizer. Okay, is it clear to everyone? So first device that is present here in this path is the economizer. Okay, and it exchanges heat with the last part of the gases. Okay, before it goes to the air preheater. So after this economizer process, the water is at saturated liquid condition. The saturated liquid is passed to a large drum. This is known as steam drum. This contains a mixture of saturated liquid and saturated vapor. So it's actually in the two-phase region. It contains a mixture of liquid and vapor. What will be the temperature of this liquid and vapor in the steam drum? What will be the temperature? I am not asking the numerical value. Means how can we find what will be the temperature in the steam drum? If the boiler pressure is known,
Yes, like if pressure is known, then the saturation temperature.
saturation temperature, correct. It is the saturation temperature corresponding to the boiler pressure. Boiler pressure is very high. In the steam drum, all this tube is at high pressure. Remember, from where does this high pressure occur? From the feed water pump. Already all these tubes are at very high pressure. Okay. Steam drum also is at high pressure. The entire water circulation occurs at very high pressure. Okay. Typically around 150 atmospheric pressure. So 150 times the pressure of atmosphere. 15 megapascal. Okay, 10 to 15. So 100 to 150 times the atmospheric pressure. Okay, this is at very high pressure. So steam drum also is at very high pressure. Okay, it's a pressure vessel, high pressure vessel. So it contains the water at saturation temperature. So at high pressure, what is the boiling point of water? What will be, say, typical boiling point? Can anyone say? 100 degree, 200 degree, 300 degree, 500 degree, 600 degree, 50 degree. Typically, what will be the boiling point of water at large pressure like this?
Maybe around 200.
Somewhere around, so it is not exactly 200, but you are partially correct. It will be around 300. Okay, 374 is the critical point, somewhere below the critical point. So might be around 250 or 300 degrees centigrade. Okay, somewhere around that. We can easily look from the table also. How much time is left today? Not much time. So if you go to the steam tables, you can easily find out for 15 megapascal what will be the temperature. Okay. So actually it is quite large. It is 342 degree. Okay, if it is 15 megapascal, 150 atmospheric pressure. If it is 100 atmospheric pressure, then it is 311. Okay, just less than the critical temperature. So sometimes keeping values in mind is better because then we get an idea about the real life scenario. What are the typical values involved in real life? Otherwise, it becomes very hypothetical. Okay. So then from the steam drum, the water flows through tubes which are outside the furnace. Okay. So these tubes are, so the water is at around say 370 degrees centigrade or 340 degrees centigrade, whatever we found, and it flows down, okay, through this outside part. So it will be in saturated liquid condition because there is no heating outside the furnace wall. So it just goes down and then it is passed back through the inside. So there are tubes, large number of tubes lining up the wall of the furnace. Okay, these are known as water walls. Large number of tubes lining up the walls of the furnace. So the water is pumped back, and because of natural convection also, the water rises in these tubes. Okay, so there can be small pumps or there may not be pumps if the natural convection is sufficient. Why natural convection occurs? Because once heat exchange occurs with the furnace gases, the water, some of it gets converted to vapor, and the mixture of vapor and water is lighter, so it tries to rise up. Okay, so this part is also known as riser. Okay, water walls or riser. So in the downcomer, the water comes down. The outside tubes are known as downcomer, and through the riser, the water rises up, and it exchanges heat with the hot combustion products due to radiation and convection. After this, some part of the water gets converted to vapor, not the entire part. Okay, part of it is converted to vapor, and this two-phase mixture comes to the steam drum. Okay, so the liquid water settles at the bottom and the vapor settles to the top. So this, if we just take an outlet from the top, only the vapor can be taken out. Okay, the vapor will be at saturated vapor condition. So this saturated vapor is passed to the superheater coils. Again, in the superheater there is heat addition because of radiation and convection. So this superheated steam, which is now at a very high temperature, around 600 degrees centigrade, is passed to the turbine, high pressure turbine. Okay. So from the turbine, this steam is again brought back. From the high pressure turbine, it is brought back for reheating. If you remember the cycle, you will see that there was a reheating process. So this is now at intermediate pressure. This steam is now at intermediate pressure. And after passing through the reheater, again it is heated back to 600, around 600 degrees centigrade. Then it is passed to the intermediate pressure turbine, and then it goes to the low pressure turbine and the condenser. Okay, so this is the path of the water. So this circulation of water continuously occurs. The water comes down and goes up. This continuously keeps on occurring. It's a continuous process, and two-phase mixture is always coming back to the steam drum, and the water settles down at the bottom, which is again moved down, and the steam settles to the top, which is tapped out. Okay, from the top. So the function of the steam drum is to separate the liquid and the vapor in saturated condition. In saturated condition, we have a two-phase mixture. So because in the steam drum, because of gravity, the liquid settles to the bottom and the vapor settles to the top. You can just take out the saturated vapor from the top. If you directly pass this tube into the superheater, there will be a two-phase mixture. Okay. And if you try to design such that the entire liquid gets converted to vapor in the riser itself, then it can cause catastrophic accidents. What will happen is that sometimes if there is insufficient flow of water, there will be more heat transfer and the vapor will not be able to take up large amount of heat because vapor has low heat transfer coefficient. So the walls of the tube will melt and release the steam outside. Okay, and because the walls are at very high pressure, it will lead to catastrophic explosion. Okay, so that's why we just convert only a small part of the liquid to vapor. Around only 10% is converted to vapor, and rest of it, 90% comes back in liquid form. Okay, we will study about this in one of the next classes, how this circulation occurs, and do some calculations also. Any questions on this part?
Sir, the figure, what is the blowdown?
Where is the blowdown?
So below steam drum.
This is just for removing the impurities from the steam drum. Okay, so there is you just tap out some of the impurities which gets settled at the bottom of the steam drum. So small amount of water, means liquid water along with the impurities, is taken out from the bottom. Okay, schematically it is shown like this. So we will continue this discussion. I will show you these individual devices, how these look like. Okay, just part of the, like, some pictures, how this. So this is the economizer tubes. We will discuss about this. These are the water valves. So entire furnace is lined with tubes. You can see, and these are very large. You can see from the size of the person here that these are very large. These holes are for the incoming coal and air mixture. Okay, which will get combusted here. So we will discuss all these things in the next class. Steam drums are also very large, huge devices. Okay, so superheaters and reheaters, then air preheater. All this we will discuss in the next class. So we'll stop here. Next class is in next week. Okay, we'll continue this discussion. This will be part of your midterm exam also. So, and please read this from the books. Okay, from that MML Vakil book you can read, or any of the books.